Welcome to This Is Jen, episode whatever it says in the show notes. I have screwed this up for multiple weeks now on both Patreon podcast and on the main podcast. In my heart, it's episode 55.
There you go.
That's my truth. Shady Ray producing as always. I believe it's episode 55, but numbering is not something that's a thing for me. Like when I used to, it's funny, I used to do some writing, like some professional blogging where I would do lists that, okay, they were a little clickbaity, like top 5, blah, blah, blah. But then my list would not be numbered correctly. I think I have a special form of dyslexia where you can't, this sounds really basic now that I lay it out. It's like you can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like that's a lot for me, evidently, when I'm like putting numbers in sequential order.
I struggle with that,
you know,
too.
I can't. So, and all the time, I mean, people thought, I think they thought I needed help. They thought I just had a very severe problem because they'd be like, Jen, so again, this post is like the top 7 things, but there are only 6 things because you skipped number 5. And like, I even proofread it. And this is how the list would turn out. The point is, I don't know what episode number this is. I should stop saying it so that Hallie Lord does not have to keep editing it out. But just look, if you're watching on YouTube, just look at the title. And if you're watching on your podcast app, it's right there. There you go. Behold the glorious episode number. It's episode 55 in my heart. My love language is iTunes reviews. Please leave a review on iTunes. I read every single one. And I have a thing, if you're one of the first 1,000 reviewers, if I am able to do you a favor, I do. And sometimes I can't. You know, if it's like, could you fly to Wisconsin, you know,
for my dry cleaning?
Right. Yeah. Could you pick up my dry cleaning in Wisconsin? I can't always do it. But yeah, there was someone who asked me for a favor that I was able to do. And I personally texted her, like just a fan of the podcast. And I personally texted her some info she wanted, because she told me she was one of the first 1,000 reviewers on iTunes. So go leave a review on iTunes. Again, I read every single one personally. I love them. Lots to get to on today's show. We just have to talk about, you know, the Gorilla Glue hair thing. Did you hit the gal who put Gorilla Glue on her hair? That is so something I would do. As I was watching that video, I was like, we are sisters of the heart. I just cannot emphasize how much that is something I would do. So we'll talk about that. I have a point. It's going to be a very quintessential This Is Jen podcast moment. My point is not what anyone would anticipate. My point would be on this, but it's something near and dear to my heart. Let me begin by saying, are you guys aware that we are about to hit the dead zone for the year, the doldrums? I believe that we never struggle more than mid-February, especially if you live in one of those states that is unlivable this part of the year. And I can say that because my state is unlivable. Texas is unlivable from a different part of the year. Our weather tries to kill us in the summer. But as we record this, there's some cold fronts moving through. Like, we're all just about to spend a couple weeks trying not to freeze to death. Even us in Texas.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's the forecast. Fahrenheit it's going to get down to the teens in central Texas.
I think it's a high of like 34
right.
or like 20 one of the days.
And this is here in Texas. I'm not even going to look at the forecast for Wisconsin and for Minnesota and for hellscapes like that, because it will be too depressing to me to know what you people are going through if this is what the weather looks like where I live. So it's cold. None of us can leave our houses. Even in Texas, we can't leave our houses. We've been in quarantine for 5,000 years. The wheels are coming off every area of life. Our mental health is deteriorating. Our children's mental health is deteriorating. And it's just like bitter, bitter cold on top of that. So I think we all need to prepare for the fact that life is just going to suck for a while. For the next few weeks, it's just going to suck. And God bless you people who catch up on my podcast. Maybe you're listening to this in the summer and you're at a beach with your pina colada and it's summer 2020 and COVID's over. You're like, what even is COVID? I don't remember what that is. No more lockdowns. We've cured it. We have a vaccine. I'm getting vaccinated as I listen to this podcast because my life is fine. I have a tan, everything. Maybe you're listening in the future and everything's fine. But if you are listening to this anytime recently after it was released, I want you to prepare yourself for the fact that you may have some real anxiety and depression crop up. And the lesson is, don't make any decisions about your life when times are hard, when you are tired, when you are cold, when you're so cold you don't even remember what it's like to feel warm anymore. When you've been in quarantine for a long time, when things are tense at home, this is not a time to make big decisions about your life. And it is not the time to form opinions about your life. I think one of the greatest life skills I have ever learned is to know when I should make big moves and big decisions and form opinions about myself and my family and how our lives are collectively going. And when it's time to say, Jen, you're tired, you're being insane right now, you've had a long few months, just don't think about it. Just stop thinking about this. I think that is one of the greatest life skills that you can ever have, is to know when it's time to say, I'll think about all this tomorrow. This is not the day to make these calls. Right now, what I'm going to do is whatever I need to do to get through these days right now. So anticipate that. This is always what, even back before we were living in a panini, when we were living in a parallelogram. I see people doing this on Twitter. They use different words for pandemic. When we're living in a panty, I don't know. They just come up with random words that start with P. Even before we were living in a parallelogram.
In a pinelope.
Yeah, in a what?
Pinelope.
I don't think that's even a word.
Not.
But let's just make it work. Even before we were living in a pineapple. Even before all that. February was always a hard month. And so this is just not the time to form opinions about your life. You are not allowed, by decree, by This Is Jen podcast decree, you are not allowed to form opinions about anything until March 1st. How about that? If you live north of the Mason-Dixon line, do people know what the Mason-Dixon line is? No. It goes through about the middle of the country. If you live in one of these northern hellscapes, and again, I can call your place a hellscape because I live in a hellscape too, then you can't think about your problems or anything in your life until May 1st. So, and I used to live in North Dakota. One time we got a massive blizzard, 6 to 7 feet of snow on May 1st. So I don't know. You might want to even push it past that. Don't think about your problems until it feels like spring in your part of the world. That's what I wanted to start this podcast with. Related, I think another life skill that is very important for us right now is learning to pivot. And here's what I mean by that. Learning to get excited about change. All of us resist change. I think especially if you're a parent, we kind of have a natural instinct to want things to be stable, to want things to be same old, same old. And so whenever any sort of change comes up, we instantly start thinking negative thoughts about it. We think, well, if you lost your job, if you have to move to a different city, if you have to downsize your house, if your kids have to go to a different school or going from school to homeschool, we always feel like change is going to be a bad thing. And we always resist it. And one of the things that has kept my sanity to the extent that I'm sane at all, which is really, yeah. Hear Shady's laughter from over there, me referring to myself as sane. One of the things that has helped me keep the shred of sanity that I have left is a long time ago, I learned the skill of not just accepting change, but getting excited about it and embracing it. And I want to give you a specific example because I know a lot of you are going through stuff like this. So here's my example. I quit my job during a pandemic. As many of you know, I was a daily talk radio host on SiriusXM, totally stable job, benefits for my entire family of 8. That's not nothing, getting benefits for a family that size. And I quit my job because I thought that comedy touring was going to come back big in fall 2020. I said that many, many times. I think it's coming back. I think it's coming back big. And I also famously said latest January 2021, I'll be back on the road. And so that was the financial model that was how I replaced that was the big plan, to replace the SiriusXM salary. I had some guarantees going on. The money was going to come in, blah, blah, blah. Now, so I have not been able to do stand-up comedy. And, I kind of like left my whole other career to do stand-up. So I kind of hit this wall, as you would. Like, what is an analogy? Let's reflect, friend, for a minute. What is an analogy of someone getting in a business at the worst time? I just don't think historically you could find a dumber move than to put all your eggs in the stand-up comedy basket at the beginning of 2020. Because unlike other art forms, like if you're a singer, you can do that over Zoom. You can do a Zoom concert. Shady is in the music industry. You can sing and people will get that. There were some beautiful performances in quarantine with some singers just in pianos in their apartments. The Time to Say Goodbye, the Andrea Bocelli, like his rendition of that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it was very beautiful. A stand-up comedy can only be done, only be done with crowds of people jam-packed in, like sardines, just packed in to small spaces. You have to be able to hear the laughter of other people. And if you don't believe me, try to see a stand-up comic doing stand-up comedy over Zoom. It is the most uncomfortable thing.
Sounds painful.
Yeah, it's the most uncomfortable thing you will ever see in your life. Actually, Aaron Weber tells a great story. You guys need to follow him. It's Weber with 1B, Aaron Weber. He's so great. He was on my SiriusXM show many times. And he was talking about how he was brought into a corporate event, but a lot of the attendees they just weren't sure what the deal is. They weren't sure who he was. And so he's just there. He's kind of doing his comedy, but people aren't laughing because they just don't know the situation. And I think it was, I have associations with a huge picture of a steak. I guess he was doing it for a steakhouse. So there was like meat in the background. I don't know. Follow Aaron Weber and ask him. He'll tell you the whole story. But many comics I know have said, yeah, Jen, just don't try it because comedy does not, stand up anyway, does not translate to the virtual world. So I'm like someone who got in the phonograph business in 1918. I'm like someone, like if you in 1981, if you were like, I think 8 tracks are the hot thing.
The thing.
And I'm going to quit my job. I have a great job. I mean, just as stable as a job could be, salary, benefits, everything. But I'd like to get into the 8-track business here in 1981. That's me. So, you guys know how spiritually and emotionally mature I am. I took this to prayer, just like all the Catholics on Instagram. I just had my flat lay of my Bible and my coffee cup, and I was just calm, and I prayed over it in an alternate universe. I didn't do any of that really. I just screamed and got depressed, and it's been fun. But you know what? God came through anyway. God looks out for fools. And I had this moment where, and this is the lesson for you. I had this moment where I was like, well, what if I stopped being a drama queen? Right. I know. Weird. What if I stopped resisting this? And what if I really openly asked God, how he wants me to use this skill now. What if I trusted that maybe God's not just playing games with my life? Because sometimes it does feel like my life it's like The Office for God and the heavenly host. They're just sitting up there with their popcorn, and it's this kind of dark comedy, absurdist comedy, and it's just for the entertainment of heaven, and like that's the whole purpose of my existence. But what if I assumed there was actually a plan, and that God would not have me invest so heavily in learning this skill just to suddenly have there be absolutely no use for it anywhere ever on the face of planet Earth? Because that's another thing. I put an enormous amount of time and effort. And also, I mean, Shady went out to these clubs with me.
True.
Where towards the end, obviously, I started doing well. That's why I did a comedy tour. But when I was first learning stand-up, it's a rough road. You don't know what you're doing. You bomb. People don't laugh at your jokes. It's horrible. Shady saw how hard I worked on that. So what if I assumed that God actually had a plan? And I said, Lord, what do you want me to do with this skill? How do you want me to use it in this new landscape? And what if I saw it all as fun? And what if I saw it as an adventure instead of just some horrible thing? So this is where those of you who follow me on Instagram might have noticed that I have been doing a lot of sketches lately. Sketches, I mean, well, you know sketches. Do I have to tell you guys what a sketch is? It's SNL, you know? It's like just little mini
It's a skit,
humor.
kinda.
Yeah, it's a skit. It's a sketch. It's, again, like SNL. So a lot of people have been like, that they're like, this is so fun. It's just, wow, suddenly it's like every time we open Instagram, Jen has a new sketch. Like, what's going on? Well, I haven't explained this publicly, so you podcast listeners are hearing it first. What happened with that is that was an answer to my prayer where I was like, Lord, why would you have me learn this very, very, very difficult skill to learn? And then it immediately, as soon as I get good at it, like the instant I get good at it, there's not a place to use it. And it occurred to me, actually, when you do a sketch, because I'd done a few before in the past, you know, I'm in comedy, so that's everyone who's in comedy does stuff like this at least a few times. And I thought back to the times I'd done that, and I thought, well, actually, this is the exact same skill set. To write a sketch, you are drawing from the exact same skills that you use to write stand-up comedy, especially the way I do them. It's very much wordplay, surprise twists on things like that. And so for me, for example, the comedy in my sketches is not physical comedy. There aren't going to be like me slipping on a banana peel and falling down. Like, I don't do Chris Farley style wildly physical comedy. But so the way I do sketches, it's very much about the craft of the word. I have a writing background, I have a stand-up comedy background. Yeah, right. And little quick flips. And that's why I always do subtitles on my sketches, because they are so word driven. Like if you don't understand one word I say, then you don't get the sketch.
Slip it.
Yeah. So that's why I always subtitle them. Which, by the way, I hope that's the hardest part of every sketch, is just getting the subtitles on. So this was an answered prayer, because I realized that it's the same skill, and I actually got very excited about this epiphany. I realized this is the secret. This is what a lot of people are missing, is that there is a way to still do stand-up comedy when you can't tour. You just have to rethink it. Instead of, like, I can't sit here and if I were to grab a mic, look, I have a mic here. So if I were to just grab a mic and say, so like a line that was in one of my sets was, imagine us telling our grandkids about what it was like during COVID, like how and there would previously have been set up of how a lot of our grandparents or great grandparents would talk about the Great Depression, like it was you youngins don't know those hard times. So in my stand-up comedy set, I say, imagine us being like, I had to carry heavy bags of bricks uphill 2 miles both ways when the CrossFit gym closed. So, it's that flip on like how ridiculous our generation is. So if I were to just sit there on Instagram and just put my phone on selfie mode and deliver it just like I would if I were in a stand-up comedy stage, well, that doesn't work. You're missing the laughter. If you should see, man, if you guys want to see a kind of train wreck, you should see some of the late night hosts trying to do their monologues without an audience. Truly one of the most painful things ever, because it just shows you can't deliver stand-up the normal way without an audience. But you can do it in sketch form. When you go into that, I'm a little bit of a character, this is a little bit of a fictional setup, suddenly the exact same premise, like, so Shady and I filmed one, Miss Martin Scorsese over here did all this directing. It was awesome. And so I put on a grandma wig and everything. And so I turned that stand-up line about COVID and hauling rocks 2 miles both ways, I turned it into a sketch, and suddenly it worked, and it worked great. And we had all these comments from people doing the crying, laughing emoji, like, you guys are killing me. This is so funny. So all of this came about. And actually, before I spill out that point, let me say I am so excited about this. I'm having so much fun with it. I have a bunch of sketch ideas coming down the pike. I'm probably going to be doing new ones at least once a week. And all of this came about because I stopped resisting what I had lost. And I emphasize the financial side of it just so that you guys understand, because I know my listeners are facing, big and difficult problems right now. This was not just some hobby for me. The stand-up comedy touring was, we were really counting on that income, and it was a really big deal when it, poof, disappeared into thin air. Again, it would be like if you started an 8-track business in 1981. Absolute financial disaster, 90% of your income gone. So I only say that. We're fine, don't worry about us. The point is that the pressure has been enormous. And when you go through a significant loss that leads to a lot of pressure in your life, the temptation is to just sit there and fix on it. The temptation is to fixate and to obsess about what you wish were different in this situation. I think everyone tends to do that, right, Shady? And what you have to do instead is just start by accepting what is. Like, I can't wave a magic wand and make stand-up comedy touring come back. And give yourself space to mourn it. I gave myself about 7 months. So, I had plenty of space to just be miserable, feel sorry for myself, use all of the most unhealthy coping mechanisms I could possibly think of. So give yourself that space. Maybe 7 hours would be better than 7 months. That, I don't know. I might recommend that. Different strokes for different folks. But once you've had that time to feel sorry for yourself about the torpedo that has just hit your life, start by accepting what is. And then here's the big challenge. Next, get excited about what is. Say, okay, this is not the situation I chose. This is not the landscape that I intended to jump into at all, but I will get excited about it. I have a new phrase. Are you ready for a new phrase that's just very exciting, Shady? This is, I write this down in my little journal a lot. You guys know I'm really into journaling, and I do a lot of that on my password protected app. Not, Lord knows I don't just have a paper journal sitting around. Okay, here's my new phrase. Everyone, see, this is like the time you spend listening to this podcast is time so well spent because you get gems like this. Change it or choose it.
Ooh.
I don't think I'm even ripping anyone off, Shady. I actually think that is a Jen original. Change it or choose it.
Merch.
No, see, but it's off-brand. Like I'm not a motivational speaker. I can't, because but you do things that are out of line of what you normally do, and people like they don't like that. So I can't suddenly be a motivational speaker. So maybe we'll give that one to Hallie Lord. Her Instagram is on fire. She's like gaining followers like crazy. Hallie Lord, you can do a change it or choose it post. And here's what I mean by that. Obviously, if a situation is annoying you, it's depressing you, well, if you can change it, then change it. But if you can't, then choose it. Meaning, act as if you chose this. Because when we opt in to things, we are more likely to be excited about them. There's an old parenting hack where they say if you let your kids pick out the vegetables at the store, they're more likely to eat the vegetables and act like they're really good because they chose it. Anything that you choose, you're just incentivized to say this is great. You just bring a whole different attitude to it. And so when you act like you chose a situation, suddenly all of these possibilities line up for you. And so during December and early January, I started doing that thought exercise. I went into sort of magical thinking land where I was like, I was imagining me telling myself a story where I was bragging about my luck. Like, how lucky am I that I got into stand-up comedy right when quarantine started? Like, what joy and what luck. And which sounds like an insane thing to say, but then I had to piece through how do you work backwards and tell a story that would lead me to make that statement? What is the story that leads up to that statement actually making sense? And so that is ultimately what led me to the realization these little sketches I do are a lot of fun. They are not hard to pull together. I've had a lot of people message me and say, you know, I'm having a really hard time. I have a lot of pressure. And I don't have time to watch entire, you know, something that's an hour long, or even if you were touring, I probably wouldn't even have time right now to be able to go out to a show or whatever. And so many people have said, Jen, honestly, the little 15-second, 30-second bits of entertainment you give us are like, this is helping me get through my life right now. And all of that came to me because I decided to act as if I chose this situation. And I decided to consciously not only accept it, but take acceptance a step further and get excited about it. So we've all lost a lot in recent months. And I cannot emphasize to you how powerful of a thought exercise that is, because not only does it just put you in a better mood, but very often, like I did, you will end up finding solutions that just weren't clear to you before you started bringing just a happy, positive attitude to the situation. Which brings us to, so I think this was either this is one of the first sketches that I did after I had this realization. So some of you guys may have seen this. I have an exciting announcement about it, but we will play it. We'll have Hallie Lord add it in post. I'll play it for Shady right now. But Shady, you're familiar with it. But let's go ahead and watch this so that I can make an exciting announcement. Hedge fund managers are suffering. Take Preston, a simple man whose fund has a minimum buy-in of only $700,000. He became interested in GameStop simply because he enjoys the hot games that the kids are into, like Fourth Night and Pitfall. Now, the victim of senseless market manipulation, he's had to move from Greenwich, Connecticut to West Haven. Okay, so I did this when the GameStop thing was really blowing up. People talking about hedge fund managers, about how, you know, they tried to short GameStop. I actually, by the way, on the Patreon, I actually had Joe come on and explain the entire like stock market and what a short is and all that. So this is the value that you get from Patreon. All right, so this is a sketch. So another little lesson here is I cannot tell you guys how close I came to not posting this. I mean, like, I came really close to not posting this because I thought, well, you know, people don't know me for talking about the hedge fund world. They don't know me for talking about stock market stuff. So the sketch was done. It was captioned and everything. But I thought, you know, I don't know. I probably shouldn't. I'm not known for talking about this. Well, Shady, could you read for me, and loudly in a bold voice, the number of likes, and let's emphasize the shares. Let's all just hold space with the number of shares on this, and then views. Could you just read me these numbers, Shady, of this sketch that I almost didn't post?
Likes first.
Yes, speak loudly.
48,000.2K. And then comments, 2,000.1K. Shares, 37.3K. 1.5 million views.
Oh, I'm sorry. How many views?
1.5 million billion views.
Round of applause for just doing it, right? Round of applause for like putting yourself in situations that you might. I'm not applauding myself. I'm applauding you guys taking risks and doing things like this. This is the first video of the year to get over 1 million views. But I want us to reflect on 37,300 people clicked the share button, like took action. 37,000 people.
Wild.
Took action on my post, like hit the share button. Not even counting the 48,000 that liked it, that hit the like button, but like told friends about the fine products that Jen's Instagram account over, or in this, these are Facebook numbers, that whatever. They told their friends about what I'm doing. 37,000 shares. And then 1.5 million views. I mean, but big lesson is just like put yourself out there, try stuff. I've put plenty of stuff out there that gets totally ignored. It's not like everything I do is a hit. So this is the result of just continuing to just spin the roulette wheel. Just put yourself out there. But the big lesson is this is really the result of me getting excited about change that was foisted upon me and that I initially resisted. And stuff like this started happening when I actually started to get excited about the things that I used to resist. 1.5 million views. We need to do something to celebrate. Seriously. Very, very exciting. So look out for my sketches. I will be doing a whole lot more of them because everyone's saying like this is the Jen, this is the entertainment that's at our level right now. Like we don't even need like the movies, like we are maxed out. Hit us with 15, 30 seconds of funny and then get out of here. Like we're busy people. So I'm having a ton of fun with it. And follow me on Instagram, Jennifer Fulweiler on Instagram. I guess evidently I'm huge on Facebook. I do not love Facebook, but I do now. I do now because 37,000 people have shared what I'm doing on Facebook. You can look me up on any social media. Not Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but let's pretend it doesn't exist. I guess what I'm trying to say is just, follow me on Instagram. So, okay, we cannot let this podcast end without talking about the Gorilla Glue story. I think you guys have probably all heard of it. For those of you who haven't, there was a woman, let's see, her name is Tessica Brown. She's from Louisiana. She did a video so she put Gorilla Glue in her hair. It looks like it is similar to other hair products you might use. So Shady, you said you've seen this, right? I mean, this has really gotten around. And her hair is stuck. It's like one mass of, it's like a rock, and it's been that way forever. And so now, I mean, there are like talks of lawsuits and everything that people are debating, and that's neither here nor there. She spent 22 hours in the ER where they tried using acetone to remove the glue, but it burned her scalp. So here's my point. This story was going around. This story took a while to hit the mainstream. And my theory is because I've noticed for years, and someone else initially pointed this out to me, and I've thought about this for years. Notice how divided women of different races are when it comes to hair. Mm-hmm. Years ago. Yes, thank you for, I'm really passionate about this. I'm really, really passionate about this. Years ago, I saw this speech by this woman. She did this amazing speech, this Black woman, and and it was one of those, like, it was kind of a monologue thing. It was so powerful. And she talked about how hair is this huge divider between white women and Black women because we don't typically go to the same salons. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to style someone who has ancestors from Africa versus someone who has ancestors from Europe, it's just a different skill set. Mm-hmm. So it's understandable that often those salons ends up being different salons because it's a different skill set. But what happens is there is not the same transmission of knowledge, and there is not the same bonding when, if I'm going to share hair tips, just naturally I would go to talk to women who have hair like mine, but then automatically that would exclude Asian women who have very, very straight hair. It's hard for their hair to take a curl. That would exclude someone with like Afro-Caribbean ancestry. Like I was talking to someone the other day from Jamaica, African ancestry, but from actually one of the Caribbean islands. And so that's a very different type of hair. So it is hard for us to have those bonding, like beauty tip kind of conversations there. What I noticed is, so I follow a lot of Black women on Twitter. Probably, if you factor in who I've muted, that's probably 90% of my feed. So they were talking about this story way earlier than the white women I know were. And I saw, once again, hair has become a divide for us. And you see it dividing women of different races. And you guys know that I think that women solve everything. Whenever you get women determined to solve a problem, we tend to solve it when we unite with one another,
True.
when we stop sniping at each other, when we break down the barriers, when we actually encourage and support each other, we solve things. Whenever there is a massive issue that faces our society, I always think, well, how are the women going to fix this one? I don't want to make it sound like men cause all the problems and women solve them. You know, I wouldn't say that.
But
yeah, you know, not here on the podcast.
Never.
I don't have that paradigm as far as anyone knows, you know? And so when, you know, there's been so much talk, good talk, most of it's good talk, about race in the past year. And this conversation has been a long time coming, and I love it. And I love that people are being a lot more honest on the subject. But I always immediately go to, okay, so how are women going to solve this? What I want to see is women of all different races having these conversations amongst ourselves. But here's the thing. If you really want to begin to have a society that is truly equal, to work towards a point where race truly stops being a factor, you have to have a community of people that are genuinely bonded to each other, that know each other, that have information flow with each other, that doesn't have anything to do with race. One of the issues I have with well-meaning people who are trying to solve this issue is they'll say, let's do a women's conference that's all about race. And I think, yeah, I mean, I know we all care about this issue, but can we be really real? Like, who is going to pay money and sign up for that conference? I care about that issue. I got to be honest. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time for that, because I'm not sure how that moves the ball forward. I just don't see that particular event moving the needle on this culture. But now let's flip that. Let's say you had a conference about fashion, you know, about how to look super hot for like half the price of whatever you're spending. Right. But then you just make sure to have people from all different backgrounds, all different, you know, people from immigrants, people from different regions of the world, people of different races, have them get together and just talk about the things that are on our minds right now. Like, let's face it, if you're shallow like me, it's like, you know, gosh, clothes are getting kind of expensive, but after quarantine, I need some new clothes. Like, that is where you can start to form real bonds, is when you take the things that people are really thinking about, not the things they should be thinking about, which we've got to be a lot more honest about that. Take the things that are really on their minds. Take the things that they are really thinking about, and get different people of different backgrounds together in those conversations. I truly believe that is how you move the needle. And what I see as this Gorilla Glue thing continues to go viral is that there's a lot of lack of understanding of women who have differently textured hair, that there's a lot of subtext there of, like, for example, I saw one woman talking about, you know, it takes hair, when you have hair that's more coiled, it takes it a long time to grow out. So there's a subtext there that if you have, let's say if you're Asian and you have different hair, you're missing that subtext. So all this is to say, I have been dying to make this point for months, and I was waiting for a story like this. Not that I'm very sorry that what happened with the Gorilla Glue, but I was waiting for an excuse to say this. Here is the type of thing that I think we can do, and it's something that each of us can do. I truly believe that it will move the needle on the race issue in this country, and it is something that every single woman can do, and I think it will have an impact. I want all women to start being curious about other hair textures, especially if you have European ancestry, simply because the mainstream in this country is more targeted at your hairstyle. If you are Asian, I'm sure you know everything about European hair because that is the standard in this country. Whereas those of us with European ancestry, we've just never had to learn about different hair textures because that's the mainstream. Everything has been catered to us. So I would say, Shady, do you think it's fair to say that most people of European descent, they don't know their hair texture? They're different, like 1A, 3C, like most of us probably don't know, right? Yeah. Whereas most Black women I know do know their hair texture because that's like if they go to a salon, they have to call and be like, are you familiar with working with 4C hair, for example? Okay, I will have Hallie put this up in post. So see, Shady, this is a chart, and if you're listening on audio, it's a chart of all the different beautiful textures of hair that women can have and the different names for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So I'll describe this for audio listeners. So if you have very, very straight hair, like it's hard to get it to take a curl, that would be, according to this chart, that would be 2A. I think I have, and Shady, I think you do too. I think we have 2B hair. So you'll see in this image that it's a little bit more, it has a little bit more of a wave to it, takes a curl. If you go all the way up to 3C is pretty tightly coiled hair. And then all the way up to 4C, that's very tightly coiled. You can get that awesome, afro look with 4C hair. Yeah, I know. It's so cool. But it's very different than 2A hair. Here is what I want us to do. I will lead this. I'm telling you. I want each of us to Google, what did I Google to get this? Just hair textures. Do an image search on hair textures. You'll get an image like this one that shows different women with differently textured hair. Learn which hair texture you have, especially if you have European ancestry and have never looked at this before. And we should work this into conversations more often. And we should take the time to learn about different hair textures. So if you, like me, have 2A hair texture, just next time you're sitting around doing nothing, want to pass some time, Google styling 4C hair or type that into YouTube. Well, I actually, the other day, it's so interesting. These videos are amazing on YouTube. You should look on YouTube. Look up styling 4C hair. For C as in Charles, like the letter C. Styling 4C hair. It's so cool and it's so amazing. And because our salons are so divided by hair texture, I've not been familiar with this. I have not been exposed to this. But these kind of conversations about day-to-day life, when you can sit down with someone of a different race and be conversant in what their beauty routine is like and the unique things that they face. When you can look at a viral video about someone misusing Gorilla Glue and say, oh, I understand all the nuances and the subtext because I've actually familiarized myself with this texture of hair, so I get that. That is when I think things start to change. And I realize how silly that sounds that I'm saying, hair is going to change the world. But I do believe that women can change the world. I believe that we're generally the leaders of the biggest and most positive changes. And I know for sure that we care a lot about our hair. Yes. And I think it's a big problem, more than we realize, that hair has been an area where we tend not to have common ground among people who look different than we do. And if we can find common ground on this, on the beauty issue, like other beauty products, like for example, A long time ago, I saw a foundation it was like a foundation I could use, but it was called Flesh. Like, well, that's flesh if you look like me, but if you look like Iman, that is not a flesh-colored tone for you. So to start familiarizing, just in the beauty world, to start familiarizing yourself with the beauty routines of people who look different with you than you do, I truly believe that it will move the needle on the issue of race, and I truly believe it can change the world. So go look up some of those YouTube hair tutorials for people who have totally different hair texture than you do. And I think, I don't know, I can't fully explain how interesting and delightful it was to just spend some time on that. But it was surprisingly wonderful and delightful. So I think that we should all be doing that. And that is a great note to and then God bless this poor woman. She put Gorilla Glue on her hair. It's like
her poor scalp.
I mean, it's basically spray super glue. Like it's like you covered your hair in spray super glue. Oh my gosh. I feel so bad for her. God bless her. And again, I think the hair issue is surprisingly important. Okay, don't forget that we always have bonus episodes on Patreon. The Patreon podcast, it's a whole separate podcast. It's called This Is Jen Backstage. And that's where I go into a little more personal territory, things that I don't want out there on Google, and a little bit more of the kind of life hacky, like things that I learn, things that are working, things that aren't working, personal stories, things like that. It's a lot of fun. I love, love, love my Patreon community. Recent episodes have been things like talking about my story with chronic pain, talking about my story with alcohol, and then, of course, Joe, since he has his MBA finance background, explaining the stock market. There's all sorts of good stuff on there. I should put Joe's queso recipe on there. That's the kind of thing I'll do. I seriously sit around and think about my Patreon people all the time. I'm like, what could I do? Is there some little bonus? Like, I'm not committed to this. I don't have to do this, but I love that community. So what's some little thing that I could give them this week? So I just kind of naturally think about stuff like that. Patreon.com/thisisjen. And I don't have, some people, they're like, it's the $500 level. Like, I only have really cheap, simple, basic level. I keep it really basic and simple, and it's so much fun. Patreon.com/thisisjen. Shady Ray, thank you for joining us on whatever episode number this is. I don't know. I can't get it right. I think it's 55, but who really knows? Hallie Lord, thank you so much for producing. Don't forget, Hallie has a new book out. It is called Falling Home. Joe read the entire thing in one sitting. Yesterday, he only planned to read one chapter, but it was so good, he got sucked in. So go get Falling Home. And I will be back with you next week on whatever the next sequential episode number is after this, here on This Is Jen.